Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 74 of the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. Tonight, I am joined by a new host, one that is semi-familiar to you, Mr. Donnie Monroe down in Kansas. Donnie, how's it going tonight?
Going very well. As a matter of fact, I just looked at the forecast, and we're in a severe drought condition here in Kansas. It's been really bad, and I don't think it's went below 90 degrees. It seems like forever, but anyway, I looked at the forecast, and we've got rain coming, and actually on Sunday, high is supposed to be only 77, so that's going to be refreshing and get me excited to go out and do some filming and start shooting. So
I was just going to say, it sounds like a good time to start some velvet filming. So tell me who we've got as a guest tonight.
So tonight we've got Mr. Tim Gillingham. He works for Gold Tip. He is a Bowtech Pro Staff shooter. I've known Tim, not close, but I've known him for a lot of years. I think I met him, man, it seems like forever ago, but it's been a long, long time ago through an old friend, Bill Edmonds. Back when Bill used to shoot Gold Tip, and that's how I kind of got introduced to Tim. And over the years, we've ran into each other a few times. I believe it was Florida. He and I shot a Pro-Am shoot together at an ASA tournament down there. But one thing about Tim that is, for me, owning a pro shop for over 20 years and, having to be technical, and then also not just a target archer, but introducing, guys to hunting and making sure their equipment's set for that. Tim is, in my eyes, fairly unique from the standpoint of he is an incredible shot, obviously as a pro shooter, but he's also extremely tech savvy. I mean, he really knows his way around a bow, and probably one of the best around. So that's something that I've always found very interesting about him, because there's a lot of pro shooters that are very good at shooting and very opinionated, but as far as really knowing the ins and outs of all the equipment, I think Tim is the man. So how you doing tonight, Tim?
Oh, not too bad. Just got done playing with my new, I guess you'd call it passion, I guess. I got these $high pellet guns, and so I guess same thing as archery. I got to work it out. I got to figure it out. Archery's kind of work to me anymore. I think I got a pretty good handle on it. So when I got to go do arrows or tune bows, it's just work to me. So I got to have something to play.
I totally understand. I've been after 20 years of having the shop. It's I've got a few bows here. I've been setting up for some friends and for some other shows, and then of course we just got a batch of new Bowtechs that came in, so I'm getting ready to set all those up. So I'm with you. I'm not as driven as what I used to be doing that, even though I still retain the knowledge. But yeah. It's definitely kind of reminds me that it's work doing that. It's not just play. So,
well, I've always taken the stance as I want to teach somebody to do it themselves. I mean, I could never understand why somebody would leave that aspect to somebody else. From the earliest age, I think from 13, 14 years old, I mean, I don't know that I've ever let anybody build my arrows from that day forward. It's just, I don't know. I feel like empowering people instead of just doing it for them. Teach them what what they're actually doing rather than just doing it for them, because then they become educated and they'll spread that down the food chain. So,
yeah.
I see a whole lot of uneducated information out there on social media. If a guy posts a problem and you get 40 wrong answers, and this poor guy probably doesn't know what to think.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be that guy. Tim, how did you find yourself developing this passion for archery and not football, baseball, basketball, whatever the case may be?
I'm 6'6", and naturally I did play basketball. I actually wrestled. I think I liked wrestling better than basketball, but again, it was primarily, I never really resonated well with team sports. It always seemed real political to me, and, you had to be in the clique. And when I got introduced to archery at a very young age, we just happened to have a very good club in the area where I grew up in Rock Springs, Wyoming. And, I was always ultra competitive. I think I got that from my mother. And, I don't know. At age 16, I was beating all the guys in the club. I was shooting. I only had one bow, so I would take it from, shooting a release one night with pins to a release the next night with a scope to fingers the next night, and I would do this all with the same bow. And so I got really fluent with how to make things happen, and it's taken an awful lot of years. I've been doing this for 35 years, so I still get, I don't know what you call it, clarity on different subjects, stuff that's happened to me over the years. But as a rule, I think I've pretty simplified it in my mind, and I have a process for everything now. And I've always been the type that I can't just, like, if I got a bow that's not shooting, I can't just set it aside and get another one. I want to know why that bow isn't shooting, or why this arrow combination isn't working. I gotta sort it out, And I think that's just led me down a road of an awful lot of knowledge and understanding of the whole bow and arrow system. And, like I said, it's not that hard to me anymore. It's just a matter of, just getting out and doing it now. So, and making sure my equipment, and I guess the thing about it is, the more you know, the more it drives you crazy too, because you can't just go out half cocked, So it takes me a lot longer because I got to, dot all the I's and cross all the T's before I can actually, go into battle.
Yeah.
So being a...
That's one... Go ahead. Sorry.
Being a pro... No, that's okay. Being a pro shooter, how often does that require you to be on the road? Not that that's a burning question in anybody's mind, but just to satisfy my own curiosity, how often does that take you from home?
Well, I travel about 100 days a year.
Okay.
I shoot about 25 events. They average about 4 days an event. So, and it ties right into my job. I run the national shooting staff for Gold Tip. So, I think it's the biggest strength of our company is the people that we surround it with. And, I'd help teach a lot of those guys, methods to their madness. And again, it just strengthens our, placement in the industry. So it's hard for, some of the new ownership and stuff to understand those little idiosyncrasies that, that make a company strong. But it is really about people. It's about people and teaching people and networking to create a strong understanding and a strong following for a brand. So, most of my job is recruiting and managing these shooters, getting them their orders, teaching them the best way to use it. If they have tuning problems, help them fix it, and that just creates a very, educated user base out there that's really promoting our company. So, yeah, the travel, I've been doing it for 15 years straight now, and it wears on you. It wears on my wife, and it even wears on me. I wish I could cut back a little bit sometimes, but, the competitor in me and the ability to win big tournaments and big money is kind of alluring.
Tim, why don't you kind of go? I know that over those 15 years, you've done a lot. I know. I think you've been a pro staff shooter for Matthews, Hoyt, and currently Bowtech.
PSE and Bowtech. Yeah, I shot Browning way back in the day. I've shot them all. I have a very good understanding of all the different bows and their little idiosyncrasies that are going to cause tuning problems and so on and so forth. And I've always really strive to surround myself with what I consider is the very, very best, so that I never get put in a position like I had been in the past where, I had to kind of justify why I did something when I really truly didn't believe it was the best, product for me to be in. And it got myself in a situation where I wouldn't recommend the product for people to buy, but yet I was shooting it.
Yeah.
And I just don't like to be put in that situation.
I don't either. And that's kind of, I think, what we were a little bit different from most shops, because, it wasn't about the brand. It was about what was new to offer to make, the hunters, the shooters more confident in their equipment, and what's going to help them shoot better, and we didn't go for, we were never trying to, look at just selling as much as we could. It was more of specialized into, really trying to take each person and whatever they can afford, get them the best bang for their buck, and really spend the time with them to
that's really good too, because you see a lot of shooters and archers being sold, bow hunters being sold short. They get the quintessential 3-pin sight, whisker biscuit out the door. Here's a dozen arrows. We don't,
too long to draw.
Yeah, nobody tends to explain to them, hey, what's the benefits of a 5-pin movable sight? What's the benefits of say a Hamsky limb-driven rest over a whisker biscuit, or even, something else like a QAD, or, what are the benefits? But the guy selling it has to have the benefits where he can actually convey it, and he has to be sold himself. He has to be, it's like when I started shooting 4-fletch. The tests that I was running were so compelling that I can't make myself shoot 3-fletch anymore. It was so compelling, what I was seeing with a fixed blade broadhead, that it has to work better for everything. It may be marginal, in a field point or a target arrow combination, but it has to work better. And in every situation when I've compared the two, over really just grinding it out, I mean, it's always performed better for me. So
interesting. In a world where 3-fletch arrows certainly are the norm, unless I'm wrong, but I'm guessing because of the amount of pro shops that I've been in and not seen 4-fletch arrows. In a world that is filled with 3-fletch arrows, what makes a 4-fletch arrow that much better that I should buy one or seek one out, I guess? Well,
just pure forgiveness. Back in the day when I started in probably mid-'80s, people 4-fletched, but everybody hand-fletched arrows. The big difference, and the reason the entire industry has been 3-fletch for so long, I believe, is, Norway developed the automated fletching machines that the majority of the industry, Easton, Gold Tip, Carbon Express, everybody fletched 3-fletch on these machines. I've been pushing Gold Tip for a long time to develop a 4-fletching machine, because I think you can recreate, the old blazer phenomena, but in a combination that will actually take the average shooter, and he will absolutely shoot better. I'm that confident in the fact that if a guy goes and shoots our, 4-fletch Valkyrie combination versus a 3-fletch, he is going to see the difference, and especially if he's shooting fixed blade broadheads. In my mind, I don't know, guys, engineering guys will say it's just pure surface area. I don't think it is. I think it creates a better air pocket wherever it is in rotation, and that straightens the arrow out sooner. So it's a combination of a lot of things, but I think it's a lot about that air pocket. Because I've tried real low profile stuff, and it may have the same amount of surface area as, say, a 3-fletch, but it definitely outperforms it. A smaller 4-fletch will outperform a much larger 3-fletch. And back when I was comparing this and seeing these dramatic results, I was shooting a 4-inch hard helical 3-fletch against the 2.5, kind of a medium, it was a Vane-Tech VMAX, just kind of a medium parabolic vane. And the difference was remarkable.
Were you doing helical on those as well?
Oh, yeah. You want a helical in arrow. And the reason for helical is if the arrow's spinning, it can't plane. The arrow planes when it stalls out. The wind takes it more also when it stalls out. Even my target arrows, I'll put as much spin as I can on them to the point where I'm not losing too much velocity. because that spinning arrow is going to fight the wind a lot better than an arrow that's not.
Sure. Yeah, and that's kind of one thing. I mean, even on blazers, we use like the boning helix jig just to give those some helical in them. And the only thing that I found, and it's been a while, I have not actually done any four-fletch testing. But as far as like how much helical and whether you're doing offset, I mean, you can see a little bit of difference. They are more forgiving, but sometimes you will see a little bit difference in speed. And that would be the only trade-off, I think, really.
Well, here's where the difference to me, I think, in most guys is the fact that I'm doing all my testing at 80, 90, and 100 yards, and the whole industry's kind of dumbed down to the 30-yard whitetail bow hunter. So,
right.
Rangefinders don't cut slope correctly because of this factor. There's lots of instances I can point to on rest quality, things like that. Yeah, it works at 30 yards. But when you get back to 80, 90, and 100, you start to see the difference. You start to see a mechanical broadhead whose blades are starting to open or flutter. You start to see the negative effects of fixed blade broadheads in all conditions. Even though, I mean, I'm an expert at it, I can make them shoot. But I feel like when I go to a fixed blade head, and I'll probably make a lot of people mad, but when there's this huge trend out here, and I argue with these guys a little bit on Facebook, but there's this huge trend for guys to shoot heavy FOCs and big broadheads, and you can kill deer with anything. Knock yourself out. But if I'm going to make a recommendation to the average guy, what's going to make them a better bow hunter, it's going to be something that's flat with a mechanical broadhead that expands and cuts big holes, because that's going to give him the most success. We still miss, the number one reason we miss in a hunting scenario is still yardage, even with laser rangefinders. And
well, I'm glad you say that. Go ahead, sorry.
Shooting 250 foot a second is not going to make that easy. I would much rather shoot 315, 320. Like I said, you can kill deer with anything. I had a girl come by my booth last year at the NFA Indoor Nationals wanting a recommendation on an arrow setup for elk. She was not a very big gal at all, shooting 40 pounds. I said, well, just shoot a 500 ultra velocity. And a lot of people would be, oh, it's too light. It's this, it's that. I said, but make sure you pick the right broadhead. Pick something that's that's got a nice slope cut to it that's going to penetrate real easy. So she come back this year. She was all grins, couldn't wait to show me the picture, and she had a 6-point bull she shot at 38 yards with a 40-pound bow, and she got a complete pass through.
Yeah, that's great.
She picked the Magnus Stinger, which was a very good choice. It's got, it's just going to slip through, with the least amount of resistance possible, and it doesn't take much to kill an animal if you hit them in the right freaking spot. That's bow hunting. But everybody wants to talk about, well, what happens if I hit him in the shoulder? Well, don't hit him in the shoulder.
Right.
Your whole...
Even if you have a fix, that doesn't mean you're going to penetrate that shoulder.
I shoot 112 foot-pounds of energy sometimes, and I've accidentally hit deer in the shoulder, and it doesn't go through.
Yep.
If you hit the right part of the shoulder, it might, but you're telling people that you have a reliable system that's going to shoot through a shoulder. Well, what part of the shoulder? The point being is it's not a reliable situation. It's not a reliable scenario. I'd much rather tell a guy, hey, you shoot a 2-blade rage or a kill zone, or, I'm going to shoot these new thorn heads this year. You can hit him anywhere from behind the leg all the way to the back of the rib cage, anywhere in that area, and he's going down.
Well, I totally agree with what you're saying, and I've got a friend that's getting ready to go elk hunting, and I'm setting his bow up, and I tried to tell him what I would recommend, and he read online and thought he had to have a 500 grain arrow, or a heavier arrow, and I'm like, man, you really don't have to have that. And I said the problem is that a bull comes in really fast and he's on you. You may not be able to range that. And it's the same thing that goes with deer. There's a lot of times that you won't have time to range. You want something that's flat shooting. So personally, I shoot a micro diameter shaft, and it's about 380 grains. And, I try to shoot something that's, fairly flat because of the fact that I agree 100%. That's the main reason. It's once you practice enough and have confidence in your setup, you can make that shot, but it's when the distance isn't correct and, or even if the deer, a lot of people, talk about I shot over his back because he moved too quick. If you're shooting a fairly flat setup to where it's shooting flat and your trajectory's flat, it's not going to, your chances are going to be minimized as far as missing that deer completely.
Exactly. I always tell people in the whitetail woods especially, speed's your friend. You're shooting through tight holes in the brush. You're shooting a jumpy animal, and, they like to duck the string, and they're coming through quick. Every time I've ever whitetail hunted, and I'm not an expert at it because I have not done it that much, but I was very quick to pick up on the fact that you've got a few spots range, but, man, it happens fast. They move around. You don't know exactly the distance. And almost every hunting situation is like that. You don't necessarily know the distance. You got a rangefinder there to help you if you got time.
Sure.
But nothing beats the flat shooting bow. And you guys are from Kansas, right?
Well, I'm from Indiana originally, but I'm living in Kansas now, and Jason's from Wisconsin.
There was a guy. He still shoots competitive too. He's probably pretty close to 65, 70 years old now, but he's a guy named Jim Bath out of Manhattan, Kansas. This guy killed some giant whitetails. I mean, some giants, 230, 240. And he always shot an ACC 318 with a rocket 75 grain head glued right in the end of it. And he was shooting like 3 grains per pound and just shooting a screaming fast bow, in the 370, 80 range, so they couldn't jump the string.
Sure.
So totally underspined.
Yeah.
But he was just trying to shoot a rocket so that they couldn't jump the string. And he killed a lot of deer that way, But, even in traditional archery, which I play in traditional archery, even traditional guys, the guys that I know that are really good traditional shooters do not subscribe to the 600, 700, 800 grain arrows. They shoot a 450 grain arrow with a 2-blade broadhead, and they can actually hit something past 20 yards.
Sure.
So,
well, if I can just ask a couple of questions here, because I'm the ill-informed. When I just pick up a bow and make sure I'm hitting the bullseye, 7 out of 10 times, and I'm good to go. I'm not a gear guy at all. So I want to ask a couple of questions that you referred to earlier, Tim. And one of them was you were talking about air pocket. By definition, what does air pocket mean? What should it mean to me? And is it anything that the average person that's going to be listening to this should be concerned with?
Well, when you make most mistakes in archery are made left and right. Okay, you got a cable guard on the side of the bow that's taking the load of the bow. And most of the form errors, when you get nervous, your body comes out of alignment because you start to lose muscular strength. A lot of guys' draw links aren't set up right, their form's not right, so they're using muscle to hold everything to full draw. And when they start to make a mistake, 90% of mistakes in archery are left and right, not up and down. Up and down is more of a grip thing. And with some of these short bows, you can do that. But most of these arrows, when they get, the reason you got a left tear or a right tear or a right broadhead or a left broadhead because you made a mistake is because that arrow got hit off center and rear due to your mistake, usually. There's lots of factors, but usually when you make a mistake, it translates into, if you were to make that mistake, say you're nervous and you're in the hunting woods and you were to have that arrow shot through paper, it might be a 1-inch left tear. Well, that's going to take the broadhead and make it want to steer off to the right. Well, fletching is your first line of defense. Fletching's job is to keep the back of the arrow in line with the front, because if that happens, the front cannot plane off, right? Point weight in front of center is the last resort. That's a resistance factor that doesn't allow it to plane off as far. But tuning and fletching is your number one, help to make an arrow setup more forgiving. And what I mean by an air pocket is kind of like a parachute on the back of the arrow. What's going to straighten that arrow out faster and get the back of the arrow in line with the front? Okay, it's going to be that air pocket created by those 4 veins. No matter where that vein is in rotation, you have pretty much this. You have 2 veins against the cross section of wind, and I think as a rule it just corrects a little bit faster. There's no need to really overthink the process. I would just challenge guys to, hey, fletch. The way I tell what fletching I'm going to run, I fletch 4 arrows up one way, for another way, for another way, and then I go out and shoot them at the furthest distance I'm going to be shooting. And that's how I tell what I'm going to shoot. There is no magical formula because speed, arrow weight, arrow diameter, draw length, all that stuff comes into play when finding optimal. And if you don't want to deal with, like yourself, you don't want to deal with optimal, I would probably coach you in the area of overkill rather than working on the edge of out of control.
Okay.
You know, and a lot of times, you know, I think a 3-blazer vein arrow with a fixed blade is kind of borderline out of control. I just don't think that's enough vein for a lot of, you know, fixed blade broadheads. You can get away with it, but it's kind of right there on the edge. If you were to compare that to 4 of those veins, you would see a remarkable difference. One of the reasons I hunt in Idaho every once in a while because I live here close, and it, you know, they're still requiring us to shoot fixed blade broadheads. It's one of the things I hate about it because I end up having to shoot a 4-fletch vein that's, you know, in a normally about a 3-inch 4-fletch or a 4-fletch blazer style vein, and it creates a lot more noise. And that animal actually jumps the sound of that arrow coming out of more than it actually jumps the sound of the bow. And, you know, that's another one of the advantages of a good mechanical is it allows you to run smaller veins, which are quieter in their air signature. So,
yeah,
you know,
and if you
I was taught that by one of the best bow hunters I know, a guy named Steve Cobreen out of South Africa. I mean, this guy's killed. It's unbelievable what the guy's killed. I don't think people even know who the guy is. He's probably killed more SCI world records than anybody in history. And he's just that quintessential adventure bow hunter that moved to South Africa to be able to just hunt. And the guy is an animal. And he told me he filmed impala, and he filmed shooting at a target behind the blind and shooting at the animal. He said the reaction was unbelievably different. And that just proved to him right there, they're not jumping the sound of the bow, because that's a pretty jumpy animal. You know, they're jumping the sound of that arrow coming at them. They're geared to move away from that progressively louder sound.
And, you know, I agree with that 100%. Matter of fact, we used to do some testing when we would fletch and different types of veins, the old quick spin veins. If you get kind of down and kind of tuck behind a tree and let somebody shoot, so you're protected, and let somebody shoot and you listen to it, you can hear those quick spins just, I mean, it's just like buzzing down through there. And I'm sure you've probably, you know, come across the same thing and stuff, but.
Yeah, I had this, I don't want to get in any trouble. Some guy beat me up on Facebook one time because he saw my dog in front of me while I was shooting. But we had this little pug dog that used to run around, and, you know, I'd be shooting and he'd be running around. And one time I remember shooting over the top of him, seeing him flinch. You know, he's well out of harm's way, but then I got the idea, well, heck, I just test stuff around them. If they flinch at it, then you know they're hearing it. You know,
yeah.
You could test different setups and you wouldn't even move, you know, but some setups, man, you just jump out of your skin.
Personally testing, even if you know, a lot of people a lot of the listeners aren't going to go through the time and, of, you know, fletching that many different arrows and going through that. But, you know, even if they just want to shoot blazers, just going from an offset blazer, to using that helix jig and fletching an offset in it or a helical in it, that makes a huge difference downrange. And I mean, when you start, again, I'm doing the same thing, you know, shooting 80 yards, testing and looking, but your groups shrink dramatically at that distance, you know, using that.
Well, it depends. You watch an arrow and watch it get drifted in the wind. It's drifting the last, you know, 20 yards or so when it starts to slow down. It's not really drifting in the first 50 yards. It starts to drift, you know, out further. Now, of course, that's a graduated skill dependent upon the weight of the arrow and how fast it's being shot. But you're absolutely right. You know, and you got to look at different. There's 2-inch high-profile veins out there that are completely different. You know, VeinTech has a HD that's real smooth. It's a lot quieter. The Blazer's got a lot of pebbly, you know, what do you call it? You know, just some different texture to it that does create a lot more noise. You know, the quick spins you mentioned, they create a lot of noise. You know, that noise is controlled. You know, so there's always just a balance in it. You know, and I just, you know, you just got to experiment. You know, every mechanical is not created equal either. You know, some have very little bladed surface exposed. I mean, I hunted with a Bloodsport Night Fury last year. In 35 years, it's the only fixed blade or the only mechanical broadhead I've ever shot that flies exactly like a field point and tunes like a field point at 120 yards. It's the only one. There's a whole lot of them make the claim. But if I take an 1.5, 2 inch long mechanical broadhead and put on the end of my arrow, it's going to make the arrow tune completely different than the field point. And that's something that people miss. You know, at 30 yards, again, back to the whitetail bow hunter, they probably never encounter it because they never even bother to check it. They just shoot their broadhead for groups, and it's close enough, and they go. You know, I'm shooting a 3-inch group. A 2-inch group's not going to matter, but that 3-inch group is going to turn into 10 inches at 80 yards.
What's the significance of the distance? I mean, certainly the majority of us aren't going to be shooting at 120 yards. I guess what's the value in doing that?
Well, I mean, I always push things to the very limit, you know. Okay. I've shot, you know, lots of animals at long distance, but I mean, I'm prepared to the 10th degree. I mean, I spent a lot of time getting ready because I don't get a lot of time to hunt, and I want to be able to make every shot I can get, you know, and right. I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, you know, my 100-yard groups are probably as good as a lot of guys' 50-yard groups, you know. But same thing with guys shooting rifles. There's guys that can shoot rifles at 1,500 yards accurately, and there's guys that can't hit nothing at 300. So,
and Jason,
it's all right. You got to know your own. You got to know your own limitations.
Sure.
You can't shoot at whitetails at that kind of distance. They're just too jumpy.
Right.
You know, and I know guys that have. But my experience with them, I remember the first time I ever went whitetail hunting. I went with a guy named Ron Smart down in Oklahoma. And I remember the first doe I shot at was 63 yards. It was 2 body lengths away by the time the arrow got there. You know, the next one, it was about in the 40 range. And, I mean, it was nowhere near the arrow. I was like, holy crap. And I finally caught hair at 28. That still didn't kill me.
So, you know, talking about that, there are some benefits to it, Jason. Maybe not 100, maybe not 120. But the thing is, when you do shoot out that far, it really kind of helps you refine your equipment. It also helps you refine your skills. And what that does is that also builds up a lot of confidence. So, you know, if you practice at 75, 80, you know, 90 yards, whatever it may be, whatever you're comfortable with, if you push the limit and you practice that all summer, when it comes to actually shooting 30 yards at a deer, your confidence level will be tremendously higher. And, you know, I don't care who you are, when you got a big buck coming in, you know, your heart rate's up, you know, you're trying to control, you know, target panic. You're trying to, you know, keep focused on the target. And so any little bit of confidence goes a long way in that. And that's kind of one thing about when Tim said, as far as you missing left and right, I can only imagine some of the people probably listening to this saying, well, I miss over top. You know, I miss over top a lot. Well, there's two things that really could spell out, and that's not so much equipment related as it could be from velocity, like we were talking before, because you're shooting a very slow bow and it's arching quite a bit. And that could cause some of the issue. The other thing would be is that you have target panic and you're not even getting down on where you need to be and you're not aiming. And that's a huge thing that, you know, I'm telling you, a lot of hunters out there really can't aim like they should. Just because
you're absolutely correct. Everything you said, spot on. I mean, I remember so much of archery, competitive wise and hunting, is psychological. Okay. your body will do what the mind tells it to. And when I'm teaching seminars and I'm teaching bow hunters, I'm telling them straight up, before you make a shot, visualize the shot. Tell yourself, this pin's going there. Because if you don't, like you said, you're just in the moment of truth. You know, you may just throw all the pins up there, pull the trigger, and not know what just happened.
Yeah, that'd be me.
And but I mean, but if you were to slow down, I remember one time I shot a nice mule deer up on the Wasatch Front here, and I was chasing this nice buck all day. And finally, I popped up over this ridge, and I hadn't seen where they went, and boom, I saw a doe with a buck right behind him, and I ranged it at 83. And I just remember the absolute confidence that there was no way in God's green earth I was ever going to miss. Because I'd shot so much at 100 and 120 that the thought of missing at 80 was just not even, I mean, it wasn't even possible in my mind. And, you know, that's what, you know, we're trying to explain is if you'll practice at 80, you don't have to, you know, you have to be able to choose the shot in the hunting situation, you know.
And even if it's not 80, I mean, even if it's 50, you know, or 40,
oh,
you know, if you're a guy saying, well, I'm not going to shoot past 20 yards anyway. Well, that's okay. I understand if that's your confidence level. But if you can push yourself to build confidence and practice at the farthest distance that you're comfortable with, whether it's 30, 40, whatever yardage it is, the better off you're going to be when it goes, you know, going into the hunting woods.
Well, and you come out west here, the idea of an average shot is 50 yards. You go out east, and that's a long shot.
Right.
So, again, it's psychological. The guys out here, if you can't make a 50-yard shot, you might as well not bow hunt, you know.
Right.
You know, you can't get that many opportunities under that. You know, hunting mule deer or antelope, or, I mean, yes, you can shoot a blind and stuff like that. But, you know, the average hunting out here, elk and stuff, I mean, I honestly have never shot an elk over 63 yards. That's the longest shot I've ever made on an elk. Mule deer, on the other hand, I've reached out there and touched them. Antelope, same thing.
And I just got caribou. I shot a caribou at 75 yards, but they're a completely different animal. I mean, when you shoot at them, they just sit there, you know, stand there and just look at you. Nope. You know, it's a different animal. It's completely different.
Yeah, and you have to. The more you know about archery, the more you realize that, you know, there's certain things you got to watch out for. You know, I went to Kodiak 2 to 3 years ago, and I knew enough to check my stuff in Anchorage. I checked my sight, but it was freezing cold out, and, you know, it was close. I checked my 20 to 100-yard gap, and, you know, it was hitting a little bit low at 100 because of the air density. But when we got to Kodiak 100 the first day, I missed a couple, and I was like, before I went back out the second day, I checked my bow, and I was like a ton off. I mean, the gap on my sight tape was way off based on the air density on the beach versus where I live here in Utah. And so this last year when we went up there, we knew this ahead of time. And I warned everybody, and one of the other guys that was with me, you know, he had the same experience. So they knew enough to prepare for it. And so you have to, you know, most guys just go up there and go hunting and don't even take a target. So they're not able to practice even. So, you know, the more you know, the more powerful you are, the more you can adapt to different situations. Had a horse fall on me up elk hunting one year. You know, my knowledge allowed me to be able to just simply, he bent the riser. I just put it on the ground, stomped it back into shape, put a piece of paper up between two arrows, paper tuned it in. I was back in business in an hour.
Awesome. Awesome.
Well, let's break it down a little bit farther here. I know we've covered a lot of different topics, but there's a couple of questions that I want to ask. You know, for the average guy that's going out, certainly pro shops aren't around every street corner like they used to be. So I would say, and I don't know if you guys will agree or not, it's harder and harder to find someone who really knows what they're doing. You know, that's in relatively close proximity to where most of us would live. What would you tell to the average, or what would you say to the average person are good rules of thumb to go by when you're trying to figure out what arrow weight to shoot? I mean, what's the math behind it? Because at the end of the day, as I see it, all of this really boils down to math, in one form or another, right?
Yeah, yes and no. The problem is people overthink it too.
True.
To me, hunting is easy. Hunting is simple compared to what I deal with in competitive archery. You can literally shoot any deer on the planet with a 320 to a 420 grain arrow, and you know, it's not a big deal. The reason I shot 515 grain arrows, for one reason: I was pulling 80 pounds and I could still shoot them at 315 foot a second. It was better in the wind. If the average guy would just simply take the position somewhere around a 380 to a 410 grain arrow, and I was just assuming this is a guy shooting 65 to 70 pounds. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you're shooting 60 pounds, somewhere around 350 to 380, even 400 is adequate. But again, I base that on what speed I want to run. Okay. It depends on the bow you're shooting. How fast is the bow you're shooting? That's going to dictate, what arrow you're going to want to use. Use their spine charts, the gold tip spine charts. I mean, we set them up where you're going to get the best out of the box experience. Keep in mind that there are a couple charts and they're based on the performance level of the bow. If you have an older bow that doesn't, put a lot of energy out, there's a chart that, is 315 foot per second rated bows and less. And then there's another chart that's 315 plus. Always err on the side of stiff. You're going to get better broadhead results because your arrows are dynamically going to react more consistently to each other. Okay?
Sure. Okay. That makes sense.
And the average guy, it's really enticing to go and try these micro diameter arrows or skinny arrows, but they create more problems. You need more expertise when you're using those, because the hardest thing about a skinny arrow is how am I going to mount a broadhead to it? Well, that creates broadhead alignment issues that, if you don't know how to deal with them, can cause accuracy problems. The average guy shooting white-tailed deer all the way up to elk is better off with a standard diameter arrow with an internal component system. They are not going to be able to outshoot the difference. Clear to 100 yards. Not going to matter that much in penetration. Shot placement is key.
That's one thing that, now personally me, I like a micro diameter, and I run a 380 grain shaft total weight. That's with the broadhead. Mm-hmm. And I like that because with the micro diameter, I don't see much wind drift when I start shooting out, farther distances.
Well, yeah, that is the technical advantage of a small diameter arrow. But that, like I said, for the average guy that's whitetail hunting and only shooting out to 60 or 70 yards, they will never see the benefit of that, that small diameter, being better in the wind.
What about the below average guy like my son? No, I'm just kidding. I just stepped away for a second here just to grab an arrow out of my case. And let's just use me for an example. Bowtech sent us these new bows, and Donnie's setting them up. And I've got some 340 grain arrows. I'm going to be shooting, I don't even know. Donnie, what am I going to be shooting?
Really fast.
Are you talking total weight, or are you talking without the broadhead?
I'm talking just the arrow. It's a
340 spine?
Yep, 340 spine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I guess I don't know the lingo or the correct terminology, but yeah, let's go over that. When you're looking at an arrow, Tim, it says 340 on the side. What is that referring to?
Okay, so spine is basically a way that we can segment arrows based on how stiff they are. Okay, what that reflects is the amount that arrow will bend when a 2-pound weight is hung. It's roughly a 2-pound weight. It's a 2-pound weight with, drag effect taken off of it. It's 1.92. So when it's suspended between 2 points at 28 inches, okay? And all that means is this a way for us to graduate and measure our line and then be able to use that information to be able to fit people. The length of your arrow has everything to do with how stiff of an arrow that you're going to need. The poundage has everything to do with that. How hard are you pushing that arrow? If you took let me give you the best example of that. If you took let's say you took a willow stick and you tried to throw it, right?
Okay.
and you couldn't, and you threw it really hard. It bent so much that it really never got any downward direction, right? And then you took a little stiffer stick and you threw it, and where it was balanced and it was flexing properly, you'd be able to get a lot more distance out of it, right?
Right.
It just basically, you got to have enough stiffness to handle the load that bow's being thrown at it. And then you've got to have enough stiffness to where the arrows are not being tacked so hard, because all arrows are not created equal. I'm here to tell you, if you get too weak on arrows, your groups start to open up because you start to bring out the little differences in the arrows. So you want to follow the manufacturer's charts, and actually lean in the direction of a little bit on the stiff side if you're ever in question, and you won't ever have a problem getting the right arrow. You can't be too stiff, but you can definitely be too weak.
Okay. So I'm going to be shooting, Donnie, I think it's 60 to 70 pounds. The arrows that I have are 29.5 inches. So are you saying that I would still want to be in maybe the upper threes?
Well, I would tell you this. If you're shooting a 29.5 inch arrow,
yep,
that's 60 to 64 5-pound arrow at that length. If you were to cut it back to 27.5 now, you could probably go all the way to, 67, 68 pounds. And let me give you probably the most important tip I can give to a bow hunter. There's two of them, really.
Okay.
There's two things that you really want to do. Yeah, and I know you guys have been around archers enough to know they got their favorite arrows, right? Because this one hits, but this one hits a couple inches left or right. When I get done with my arrows, I have 24 arrows that I can pull out of the quiver, and they will all hit in the same arrow hole. And the reason is I tune the arrows, okay? Most arrows come with an off-color cock vane, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's for Joe Schmo. I mean, I shoot a 4-fletch with all the same color because I know they're not all created equal, and I know I'm going to be rotating the knock around the shaft to find the sweet spot. The best way to do this is to just simply shoot them through paper at 5 yards, okay? A broadhead will always steer opposite of the paper tear. So if I shoot 4 arrows across the paper and I've got 3 of them a bullet hole and one's got a high tear in it, the one that's shooting a high tear is always going to shoot a low broadhead. And the further out you get, the more it's going to hit low.
Okay.
So we want to rotate our nocks. And this is why you'll see a lot of professional shooters shooting all the same color fletching, because they're rotating nocks when they have an arrow hitting out of the group. Whether they're doing it like I do through paper and then testing it in a shooting machine. I do that so that I can go to the end consumer and say, hey, look, I know you don't have a shooting machine, but if you have paper, you can do the same thing. And if you're very meticulous with it, shooting your arrows in through paper at 5 yards is almost equivalent to shooting them in a shooting machine. It will eliminate all your broadhead flyers. The second thing is you need to learn how to spin tune broadheads. Now, I did a video on our Gold Tip YouTube channel. It's called Broadhead Alignment. Just watch that. It'll show you how to use a Pine Ridge arrow spinner and spin tune the broadheads, because the broadheads are all different in their ferrule diameters, the part that fits inside the insert.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you ever wiggle a broadhead right before you tighten it down, there's varying degrees of play on it based on how the broadhead mates into the actual insert. As a manufacturer, we have to make the inserts fit everybody's broadhead, so there has to be a tolerance, right?
Yep.
So the inside tolerance of that insert is 0.206. Well, I've seen broadhead companies build their ferrule diameters as low as 197. So you have 3.5 thousandths of play on each side. Well, graduate that out to a 2 or 2.5 inch long Schwacker broadhead, and you can see how you can have a point that's not dead center in the axis of rotation. So if you watch that video, it teaches you how to kind of push the point around until it's dead, spinning dead perfect.
Okay. And just for anybody listening, I will put a link to that video in the description of the show, just so everybody that wants to can check that out. I just found it here on Gold Tip's YouTube channel.
And there's another video in there if you want to use small diameter arrows. You want to use our Pierce hunting arrows, which are extremely popular. I did a video this year called Building the Pierce Hunting Arrow. Watch that. It covers how to spin tune that insert. It's it's again, you have longer parts that are mated together, and the further we get away from the end of that shaft, the more the run out affects everything. So, I like on those small diameter arrows, I like to glue the inserts in with hot melt, and then I like to rotate the point until everything just spins dead perfect.
Okay, that makes complete sense.
But that's extremely critical for accuracy with broadheads.
And those are all things that you can do at home it doesn't sound like you need any expensive machine, just with the arrow spinner that you mentioned earlier. And those are all relatively simple things, right?
So I've done it with 4 nails, just crisscrossed before, when I didn't have a spinner or I forgot it at home or something.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, yeah.
Just something where you can rotate the point up against something and basically see where it's at its low point, so you know where to push and where to to get that point back in the dead center.
So
yeah, you can use like whiteout and just mark like on your shaft and the outsert, and some of the outserts are snug enough fitting that you can put them on there and you don't even have to use hot melt. It depends upon the arrow manufacturer, but you spin them and you can kind of watch that, and you can actually then start moving that outsert even, and you can see some of that changing. And you're just watching in and how it's spinning.
There's the insert outsert fit to the actual arrow, and then there's the broadheads fit to the actual insert also. That's a factor. And when you're dealing with an internal component system, usually the internal component systems are a lot more concentric, right? Because you have an insert that's glued to the inner wall of the shaft. It's usually, if it's built worth of crap, is perfectly concentric. The only thing we're dealing with is the ferrule diameter and the broadheads fit to the actual insert, so it's way easier to get them to spin straight.
Sure.
That's why, again, I just reiterate that the average guy is better off shooting a standard 5/16 diameter, carbon arrow for most hunting usages. It's just there's really no reason to shoot anything else.
Gotcha. Okay.
But fads run, and I'm just as guilty as the next guy to trying to push the envelope,
What tips would you give someone that is going to be a hunter, like most of the guys that are and gals that are listening to this? What are some good habits to get into just on a very base level in terms of shooting?
Well, here's one of the big things that I see is wrong with this industry. Guys will spend $1,200 on a bow, but they won't spend 2 nickels to learn how to shoot it. Okay, I had ideas, and I've been involved with a couple organizations that were trying to sell lessons or sell information, and it won't fly. People won't pay for it, I guess, in this industry like they would in golf or so on and so forth. So it's another reason, if you find a good pro shop and you find some guys with some expertise, you want to support them. It's harder and harder for these guys to make it against the corporate ownership of these big companies, including Gold Tip. We're corporately owned now, so they tend to want to lean towards the box stores and the big stores for that their sales, when the pro shop really is essential for teaching the skills needed to be an archer. Get involved with 3D archery and your tournament archery. Nothing will make you a better hunter than becoming a better shooter. And you don't have to eat it up like I do, but it's good to get involved, and you'll start to locate those 1 or 2 guys in your community that are kind of the go-to guys for knowledge and advice. And it's worth paying them a little bit to give you the basic fundamentals of a good anchor point and teaching you how to grip the bow. If you can grip the bow and have a good anchor point and your peep's at the right height, then it's simply lining 2 objects up together and squeezing the trigger. It's really not a hard thing to do. The problem is most people do not get set up properly in the beginning. And, it becomes difficult for them. Or they bought a bow from their buddy or in a pawn shop, and, you see just a variety of different things,
Yeah, I bet you've seen just about everything.
I remember one time I I did a thing for some Boy Scouts. One of the gals at work wanted me to do some thing, and I showed off a little bit at first. Popped a balloon at 50 and 100, and one of the kids in the group, he had a Bowtech destroyer and a 5-pin movable sight and all the bells and whistles, And he's like, "Can I try it back here?" I said, "Let's move you up to 50. If you hit there, let's we'll consider it." Well, I blew the balloon pretty dang big. It was a foot in diameter. He shot for an hour and a half and never hit that balloon at 50 yards. So, he had he had a $1,500 setup, but he couldn't hit nothing with it and I probably could work with that kid in an hour and have him fundamentals completely changed. And, that's what competitive archery teaches you. Most guys don't understand that the top level competitors shoot the way they do. They take things to the point where a half a twist in a bus cable is making the difference between them holding the bow steady and not holding it steady. And that sounds pretty nitpicky to a lot of guys, but that's what
even down to the eighth of an inch of just fitting you perfect. Most people think that's crazy, but when you see that and trying to help somebody and explain it to them with their own setup for the first time, they think you're crazy until after you finally got them set up, and then they start to see it and they're like, "Wow, I would have had no clue." So it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. It's hard when you're first setting somebody up because they, I heard a comment one time. A coach was saying, "It's my job is to teach these guys until they're good enough to teach themselves." And at some point, you have to be able to look at your own shooting and be able to experiment and say, "Hey, I'm doing this and I'm getting this." And that's what doing something like shooting indoor, where you're only shooting at 20 yards at a spot target, will teach you, because that repetitive shooting, even if you just pick the same distance, say you want to shoot at 50 yards all the time and you have your own little game that you want to play with yourself. If you do the same thing all the time and make it repetitive, you'll start to understand that, hey, when I do this, this is what happens. Okay. I had a buddy of mine that I was setting up. He's a big, strong guy. He's a framer for a living. And, these are usually the hardest guys to set up because they cannot grip the bow nice and soft. And so I just simply put the guy after he just kept shooting nothing but left tears and left tears and left tears, and he's shooting a Bowtech, so I know for a fact it's not the bow. Okay, these are the simplest bows to shoot in the world. I mean, I shot his bow with a bullet hole. He'd pick it up and shoot a left tear, but I could see it as I got behind him. I could see the knock was left of the point, so he's torquing the bow. So I made him stand in front of paper and shoot that bow for an hour until he could start to figure out, when I did this, this is what I got. And, that's another drill that works extremely well because if you can't shoot the same arrow twice through paper, you're not going to get the same result downrange.
When you say the same arrow twice through paper, what you're referring to is the same arrow with the same tear or not a tear.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you shoot a left tear one time with the same arrow, then because all arrows aren't created equal, you're going to see some differences between arrows. And the harder you push the spine on them, the more difference you're going to see. But if you shoot one arrow over and over and over again, but you're not getting the same tear, then it's something you're not doing repetitively, in your form. And
sure.
It's a very good indicator. You don't have to go to the range. As long as you have a place, you can shoot 5 yards through a piece of paper, you can get a lot of very, very good training, in that way, especially when you're first learning.
Sure.
And actually, when you're first learning, the best thing to do is just shoot up close anyway. I mean, the very first thing is, number one, when you're trying to get set up or find somebody, ask around, try to find somebody that's reputable, that you've heard really takes the time and goes through and, helps somebody get set up properly for the length and takes the time to tune the bow. And, that's hard to come by nowadays, but, really ask around, try to find somebody. And then once you get it, I recommend, honestly, get in front. I mean, I don't care if it's 10 foot in front of you, put a target up in front of you and just practice drawing back, practice getting your grip consistent, your anchor consistent, centering the peep in the housing your sight in the peep, and, just concentrating on making a good shot, because that stuff right there will build confidence, and that will help reduce, your target panic to where you're covering that. Because I'll tell you, the number one thing that I saw that affects people the most as far as whether they're successful or not, as far as once they get inside an animal to where they can get a shot and actually executing a good shot, was target panic. And there's so many people that came through the shop and you felt bad for them. So, you got to kind of work that up. And I personally had it years ago. So I think it helped me learn a lot. And it helped me, just try to educate others around it. But man, that is a huge thing. And one of the best things that I can tell somebody is, get up close where you're on a target, close your eyes and just shoot the bow and just get comfortable shooting the bow. And, just make sure you're on target and close your eyes. And that's called, just blank bell and just really training yourself subconsciously to make a shot every time. And that will build so much confidence in just shooting the bow. And then you can gradually step back,
Sure. Well, you brought up the subject of target panic, and I want to explain this to people. I have shot my entire career triggering the shot. That's why I got the nickname the Hammer. I shoot my trigger a lot like most guys bow hunt, like most guys, competitive rifle shooters shoot a rifle. But in the archery world, this target panic has created a whole industry of surprise releases. And some guys really fear that anticipation so badly that they actually hunt with a back tension. And I went to see Lanny Basham many years ago, and he was he's probably one of the quintessential mental coaches in the country. Had a big rifle shooting background, and one of the things that I picked up from him was he said, "Your mind does not know the difference between a shot or a visualized shot." He said, so if you're having problems and you're struggling with your confidence, just like I was explaining earlier, when you throw up on an animal, you want to have visualized that shot before you do it, because then your mind knows what to do. If you replace it, say, for example, you're having some problems with anticipation. Number one, you want to nip it in the butt before it becomes full-blown, basically a panic attack, because that's what it is.
Sure.
The way they solve panic attacks is by visualization. So if you'll take the time to visualize, once you understand what a good shot feels like, you're going to do this from your blank bailing and from your short range shooting. You're going to understand what that shot feels like and looks like. Then you want to visualize that shot in your head before you do it, and then visualize it after you do it. And if you'll completely reinforce that twice, pretty soon that one bad shot in the middle is going to be replaced by a good shot. Okay. For every 3 shots you're making two good ones because you've done it in your mind. And I absolutely know that works. And I've never really dealt with much target panic over the years because I never really, number one thing, the number one problem is people associate it as a negative. Okay. When they don't, because they don't really understand what's happening. A lot of it's the movement and the fact that they haven't created a good repeatable form, so they got way too much movement in their shot. And, that is what causes that anticipation. I did a seminar up at the Shields University with Bee Stinger, and I just reiterated to most bow hunters, nothing is going to help you at the moment of truth like a good set of stabilizers and understanding how to stabilize your bow. If you're climbing up a tree, there's absolutely zero reason for you to be shooting without a stabilizer, or at least some stabilizers that's actually going to do some stabilizing effect to the bow. These little 6-inch stabilizers that do nothing but hold your wrist strap on, they're a waste. They don't do anything. And I started out my seminar with, we know people are being sold short because our number one selling stabilizer is a 6-inch sport hunter. Okay. Stabilizers in tournament archery is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned in the last 5 years, my last 10 years. It's probably one of the biggest things that has helped my game because it slows the motion down, okay, where it's manageable. And, when you're in a hunting situation and a bull elk's charging in, I pack a fairly heavy bow around the field, with a pro hunter, 12-inch pro hunter out of the front of it, because I know when I get jangled in that moment of truth, there ain't nothing going to help me like that stabilizer. I see guys all over on TV shooting with no stabilizer, got a carbon bow with no stabilizer even. I mean, you talk about a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I actually, one of our team members, Dave, asked me earlier about stabilization, what he should do. And that was one of the key things that I was telling him that, that's the reason that you want to balance it out and have that additional weight is to minimize your movement, which will help you, keep from getting too excited in the shot, and help you slow down and make a good shot. But it's kind of it's crazy because, we went on such a craze where, everything they want carbon bows and carbon stabilizers and everything extremely lightweight and, they can't hold it worth a darn, so it's bouncing all over the place when they're at full draw and then they wonder why they can't relax.
So so you're saying that a longer stabilizer is way more beneficial than a 6-inch one. A 6-inch one just is
Well, let me rephrase that. It's all about having what we call a moment arm. Okay, you never seen a guy walk a tightrope with a bar sticking out one side, right?
Nope.
The 2-part systems are probably some of the very best. We have a new system called a counter slide that sits off the left side of your bow and runs a 15-inch bar. So now I have a 15-inch stabilizer that I can put weight on front and back and counteract the weight of my sight, my quiver, and make everything hold nice and balanced. But also, the weight in the front and the back are resisting each other, right? So if I put 10 ounces out in the front bar, but I don't have anything in the rear, when I wiggle that front left and right, there's nothing in the back that's kind of counteracting it. Okay. This stuff is I've shot certain bow designs with no stabilizer very effectively, but most of these bow designs today, especially in hunting bows where they're going shorter, lower brace heights, those are not easy bows to shoot, and they even are going to benefit even more from stabilization. And a lot of it is how the shooter applies pressure. One guy pulls really hard in this shot, the other guy shoots kind of real soft. Well, they're going to stabilize their bows a little bit differently. And this may be getting a little bit too in depth, but the main rule of thumb is just, experiment with some stabilization. I always told guys that if you're going to run a single stabilizer, there's not a better stabilizer on the market than a Bee Stinger Pro Hunter, because it incorporates a big disc weight on the front that puts that weight on the very end so that it gives you some resistance to pull against. Because if you're pulling hard in the shot and it's moving your sight all around, that just tells me, hey, I need more resistance out there because I'm just pulling everything all over the place.
Sure.
Now, in target archery, we use a 30-inch bar to do that, but that's not real practical in the hunting woods. So we have to shoot a shorter bar with more weight on it to kind of achieve the same effect.
Okay.
I shoot Buckmasters, for example, and Buckmasters has some running targets, right? And I learned this very quickly in ESPN Great Outdoor Games when we had running targets, is that if you did not have, and I'll run 2 pro hunters in that situation with weight on the front and the back, because if you did not have that counteracting weight, when you were following that target, you would just swing past it, and you would and as soon as you had that front and back weight, they would counteract each other, and you'd settle in way, way faster.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, I mean, hunting is always a trade-off, okay? It's always a trade-off of portability versus functionality, okay? In target archery, we use an archery scope. Not real practical in the hunting woods. You get rain all over it and dirt, and you can't see nothing, right? Or the sun glares. You can shoot good enough with a pin.
Mm-hmm.
But then, some guys, some of these pin sights, they take it to the 10th degree. I mean, myself personally, when I shoot a pin sight, I custom make my pins the colors that I see the best. I don't see red pins very well at all. I mean, they look huge to me. But every fiber optic pin sight out there's got one in it. I don't see red well. I try to make most of my pins green and then just break them up with a yellow, just so I don't get lost in the heat of the moment. Because green is what most people's, eyes actually see the best.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then I doctor my pins up, or I use tape on the housing, and allow light in when I need it, so that I keep them dulled down to where I can actually aim with them and see around them.
Okay.
One of the biggest things that give a guy target panic is aiming at a round circle. So when I shoot my hunting bow, where I've got 19 thousandths pin in it, I will take a piece of cardboard that's about, probably 4 by 6 inches, and then I'll take a spray can, a black spray paint, and I'll spray paint around the edge so it's got basically a border on it. And then I'll put a sticker in the middle of it and stick it on, and that's what I actually shoot. And because I can aim at it so well, the square or the triangle does not give me the amount of feedback that a round circle does. And I'm convinced that round circles give guys most of their target panic.
Really?
That's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I will shoot extremely well on a small dot that I'm kind of like just pulling on and off of and firing on it, because my focus is so finite. And when I have a 19 thou pin, I can't do it because I'm covering up what I'm looking at, and I'm having to pull it off and see where it's at, put it back on and see where it's at. That's what causes anticipation. Now, when I put it on that 4 by 6 piece of paper, my mind is thinking up and down, left and right. That's all it's thinking. Okay? And I can see the pin in the middle of the pad. And a lot of times, if you're sighting your bow in and you want to do it real precisely, just do a line instead of a circle or a dot.
Yeah.
Because a line will make you do one thing. It'll get you your vertical spread. Okay.
Okay.
And then we do most of my 3D setups. I sight in on a line. Levi Morgan will tell you the same thing. As I get out further, I just make the line a little thicker, because I don't necessarily have to break the shot right on the line. If I broke it on the bottom of the line and the arrow hit there, then I know it's sighted in, right? I can tell where I was on that line, but I don't have to worry about the left and right. Then when I want to sight the left and right in, I just put a vertical line and sight the windage in that way.
Interesting. I guess I've never thought of breaking it down like that. So when you're sighting a bow in, that's exactly how you break it down. I guess it makes sense. Why not do one thing at a time rather than being all over? I remember a couple of years ago, Elite sent me a bow, and it ended up on my porch step, like, I don't know, 3 days before the season started, and I'm out at the Rod and Gun Club, and I'm just all over. And I can see where that starts to it presents a lot of value, in my opinion, because you're concentrating on one thing at a time, I guess, and which makes complete sense. But I never stopped to think about it like that before.
Even target color, they make a lot of these targets really bright colors, or because they look good on a store shelf. But it's one thing. The biggest thing we complain about it at an ASA tournament is the practice targets suck. You can't see your pins on them because they're too bright. Probably the most comfortable thing to shoot at is a piece of cardboard with a black line on it or a black dot.
Really? Okay.
Because you can see your fiber optic pin in it really good, and it's not, and everybody's a little different on what what they like from an aiming standpoint. If you go into indoor target archery, you'll see a plethora of different aiming apertures and dot colors and dual lenses and rings and dots. I mean, you'll see everything because everybody's
got their magic fix,
Right.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I do have, how, just like you said, that archery is all about give and take, and kind of referring back to what we talked about earlier, about flat shooting, missing deer, because most of our listeners are going to be, shooting deer 35 yards and under. And that's kind of why, Jason, I kind of picked a bow. It's the Bowtech Realm X. And it doesn't have to be that brand or whatever, but I personally love that bow because you can harness tune it perfectly to the individual. But the other thing about it is that it has very low reflex geometry. So that's a whole nother aspect, and I won't dig into that, but it's a very, very forgiving bow that is still quick. So when, just last week I did a poll on our think, Instagram story. And I asked hunters, basically to take the poll, and would you prefer smooth or speed? And it was like 79% smooth. And I don't disagree to a point. You want it to be where you can pull it okay. But, honestly, I think what you want to look at, because a lot of people go in and they draw a bow back off the shelf and it's smooth and, no vibration. They're like, oh my gosh, I got to have it. But, honestly, what I personally try to look for, and I think would benefit more people, is get a bow that is easy to shoot, that they can be very consistent with. And there's some features that, maybe another thing we can talk about, but get one that they can shoot very well, that the grip is consistent, and get one that they can kind of push the limit to the speed. So basically, I think forgiveness and accuracy is number one, but at the same token, if I can take that and get speed as well, so if I can shoot a fast, forgiving bow, that's really what I want, because I want to be able to shoot flat as
you're talking about a happy medium. There's a happy medium to everything.
That's right. And instead of just going with, the slowest, smoothest, that's silky smooth, it's no vibration, try, instead of getting on that, try to look for a bow that is a little faster, that's still very easy to shoot. Because honestly, most of these bows, almost any of them nowadays, if you put a stabilizer on, you're going to reduce a lot of that as far as vibration or anything. I mean, you want to be able to draw it smooth. That is just, having the drawing fit correctly and getting the poundage right. But
I always told people the Bowtech system, that binary overdrive system, is the very best in the industry. It creates the widest range of tunability to the individual shooter's form of any bow system on the market. Now, the average guy goes out and buys a bow. They pay $1,000 for it or $1,200. They expect it to tune, okay? But they can't identify, a lot of them cannot identify the features on a bow that are going to make that bow more repeatable and more tunable. And the Bowtech really has it all. It has that unbelievably good limb pocket. And I'm happy that, I had some part to do with that in helping them in that direction, because, they built that pocket on their old destroyers and their specialist, and it's just a phenomenal pocket. You want that pocket locked to the riser, okay? And then you want the limbs locked into the pocket. But that yoke system just absolutely balances everything out and allows you to fine-tune that bow. The flex guard reduces the amount of rotational force in the bow. The average guy does not know how to look at a bow and identify those features. And so, they're real susceptible to marketing and advertising. But I'm with you. I think the Realm and the Realm X are the two finest hunting bows I have ever seen built in the whole entire time I've been bow hunting. It is absolutely some of the very best bows I've ever seen put together. It's just reliable. For me, as a competitive archer, the first place I look is a limb pocket. Is how is that limb pocket going to hold up, and is it going to move around? If it is, it's going to cause me problems.
Well, there you have it. Donnie and I's interview with Mr. Tim Gillingham, Pro Staff Coordinator for Gold Tip Archery and Pro Staff Shooter for Bowtech Archery. And we couldn't be more excited that Bowtech is on board with White Knuckle. Donnie's in the process of setting up our bows, and we should have them here by the end of this week. I hope so, Donnie. Please get them to us as quick as you can. With that, I will start to close the show out for the week. Before I do that, however, I just want to remind everyone that pay attention to social media here. We're going to have a brand new bundle coming up from Ozonics. Ozonics, as you know, because I've mentioned it 100 times over the course of the last few months, that they are manufacturer ship direct only, which means you can only buy it through www.ozonicshunting.com. And what they've done is allowed us to have some say in what we want to put together for our loyal listeners and viewers. And what we did is we put together a run and gun package. Now, I don't know if that's going to be available at the time that this episode is released. If it is, great. If it's not, just keep your eye on social media for that bundle. So it's going to be called the White Knuckle Productions or WKP Run and Gun Bundle. I will wait to share the details of exactly what's included in that bundle and exactly what the pricing is until it's completely ready to go. But I think you're going to be excited to get your hands on what Ozonics has put together for us. So with that, I'll just say thanks again for listening. Thanks again to Ozonics, and have a great rest of your week, guys and gals. Jason out.